3 weeks earlier, the Kepler shipyards hung in the darkness beyond Neptune's orbit, hidden among the frozen rocks of the Kuiper Belt. No civilian ships came here. No commercial traffic passed through this region. This place existed on no public maps, and only a few hundred people in the entire human government knew it was here. Dr. Park Hyun walked alone through the empty corridors of the ship. His footsteps echoed in the silence, and the emergency lighting cast long shadows on the walls. The ship was nearly complete now. 5 kilometers of advanced technology, of equations made real, of mathematics that bent the laws of physics into new shapes. He stopped at a viewing window and looked out at the ship's exterior. The hull was covered in patterns that looked like writing, but were actually something far more complex. Each line, each curve was part of a massive equation, and together they formed something that had never existed before in the known universe. The Peacekeeper. Humanity's answer to a galaxy drowning in violence. Hyun pressed his hand against the cold window and remembered why he had built this thing. He remembered the colony on Arcturus IV, where he had lived with his wife and 2 daughters. He remembered the day the Rexian raiders came, looking for resources and finding people instead. He remembered the emergency broadcast, the screams, the silence that followed. By the time the human defense fleet arrived, there was nothing left to save. 3,000 colonists dead. His family among them. That was 8 years ago. For 8 years he had worked on this project, pouring his grief and rage and desperate hope into something that could make sure no other father lost his children to the casual cruelty of stronger species that saw humans as weak and unimportant. Behind him, a door opened. Hyun turned to see Admiral Choi Yuna enter the corridor. She was a tall woman with gray hair and the kind of face that had seen too many battles. She had approved this project, fought for its funding, and protected it from those in the government who thought it was too dangerous to build. "Dr. Park," she said, her voice formal but not unkind, "the captain has arrived. He is waiting in the briefing room." Hyun nodded and followed her through the corridors. They walked in silence. 2 people who had worked together for years but had never quite become friends. The weight of what they had created stood between them like a wall. The briefing room was small and practical, with a holographic display at the center and chairs arranged in a circle. Captain Lee Min-ho stood looking at the display, which showed a rotating image of the Peacekeeper. He was younger than Hyun had expected, maybe 40, with short dark hair and eyes that looked tired even when he smiled. "Captain Lee," Admiral Choi said, "this is Dr. Park Hyun, the lead scientist on the Peacekeeper project." Min-ho bowed slightly, a gesture of respect between Koreans that felt strange here in the cold reaches of space. "Dr. Park, I have read your papers. Brilliant work. I just wish it was not necessary." Hyun appreciated that. Not congratulations, not excitement about the weapon, just regret that it needed to exist at all. "Captain, are you ready to understand what you will be commanding?" Hyun asked. "I do not think I will ever be ready," Min-ho said quietly. "But I need to know anyway." Hyun activated the holographic display and the image of the Peacekeeper expanded to fill the room. He began to explain. "The ship is powered by what we call the resonance core. It is based on principles that we discovered in ancient archive texts, combined with human quantum physics and some mathematics that we frankly do not completely understand ourselves. The core can detect hostile actions across vast distances. Every weapon discharge, every aggressive movement, every act of violence creates ripples in space-time. The core reads those ripples, like hearing sound waves," Min-ho said. "Exactly. But the core does not just listen. It can respond. It generates a field that we call the resonance field. This field can interfere with the fundamental forces that make weapons function. It does not destroy the weapons. It does not kill anyone. It simply makes violence impossible within its range." Admiral Choi spoke up. "Show him the test results from last month." Hyun changed the display to show footage from a classified test. A remote asteroid field where decommissioned warships had been placed as targets. The Peacekeeper, still incomplete but functional, had activated its core at minimum power. The test ships had fired every weapon they had at designated targets. Nothing happened. Missiles launched and then simply stopped in space, their engines dead. Energy weapons fired and dissipated into harmless light. Kinetic rounds drifted to a halt as if caught in invisible honey. The field remained active for 17 seconds, Hyun explained. In that time, not a single weapon functioned within 300,000 kilometers of the Peacekeeper. When we deactivated the field, all the weapons remained permanently disabled. The field does not just block violence temporarily, it makes it impossible permanently. Minho stared at the footage. Range? At minimum power, as you saw, 300,000 kilometers. At full power, we estimate the field could encompass several star systems, and if we activate what we call the Omega configuration, the field could theoretically spread across the entire galaxy. Theoretically, Minho repeated. We have never tested it at that scale. We cannot test it. Once activated at Omega configuration, the resonance core will burn itself out. The technology is too advanced to replicate quickly. It would take decades to build another one. Minho walked around the holographic display, studying the ship from every angle. And the cost? Admiral Choi mentioned in her briefing that there is a cost. This was the part Hyun dreaded explaining. The part that made him wake up at night wondering if he had created something monstrous instead of miraculous. The resonance field is powered by the ship's reactor, yes. But to function it also draws on something else. Something we call life energy for lack of a better term. The field requires consciousness to guide it, to make it selective, to ensure it only affects weapons and not, say, a child's toy or a surgeon's laser. That guidance comes from the crew. You mean it drains us, Minho said flatly. Yes, at low power the drain is minimal. Crew members might feel tired, might need to rest more. But at higher power levels, the drain becomes dangerous. At the Omega configuration, activating a field large enough to encompass the galaxy would require enormous amounts of life energy. Our model suggests that approximately 50 crew members would fall into a deep coma. They would not die, but they would not wake up either. Their consciousness would be woven into the field itself, maintaining it permanently. The room fell silent. Minho stared at Hyun and the scientist could not meet his eyes. You built a weapon that eats souls, Minho said. I built a weapon that ends war, Hyun replied, his voice shaking. I built it because my daughters are dead and I cannot bring them back. But maybe I can make sure no other children die the way they did. Yes, it requires sacrifice. Yes, it is terrible. But is it more terrible than another 10,000 years of galactic war? Is it more terrible than entire species going extinct because they were in the way of someone else's empire? Admiral Choi placed a hand on Hyun's shoulder. Dr. Park has volunteered to be part of the crew. He knows the cost personally. Minho looked at Hyun with new understanding. You intend to be one of the 50. If it comes to that, yes. I built this thing. I should be willing to pay its price. For a long moment, Minho said nothing. Then he nodded slowly. I need to meet the rest of the crew. I need to understand who is volunteering for this mission and why. And I need to tour the ship. Every corridor, every system. If I'm going to command the Peacekeeper, I need to know it as well as I know my own body. The crew is assembling now, Admiral Choi said. 400 volunteers from Earth and all the colonies. Every one of them has been told exactly what this ship does and what it might cost them. Every one of them chose to be here. A young man entered the briefing room, slightly out of breath from running. He looked barely old enough to be out of university. Sorry I'm late, Admiral. The core calibration took longer than expected. Captain Lee, this is Engineer Kim Doyen. He is responsible for maintaining the resonance core and all its associated systems. He is the youngest member of the senior crew, but also one of the most brilliant minds we have. Doyen bowed quickly, looking embarrassed. The captain does not need to hear that, Admiral. I just keep the numbers balanced and the systems running. Dr. Park did the hard work. Doyen figured out how to prevent the core from overloading and killing everyone on the ship instantly, Hyun said. Do not let his modesty fool you, Captain. Without him, the Peacekeeper would be a beautiful 5-kilometer bomb. Minho smiled for the first time since arriving. Then I'm very glad you are here, Engineer Kim. Now show me my ship. They walked through the Peacekeeper together, 4 people carrying the weight of humanity's future. Hyun pointed out the resonance emitters built into the hull. Doyen explained the cooling systems that prevented the core from melting through the ship's structure. Admiral Choi discussed crew quarters and supply storage, and Minho listened to it all, asking questions, making notes, preparing himself for the burden of command. When they reached the bridge, Minho stood in the captain's chair and looked out at the darkness beyond the shipyard. Earth was a tiny blue dot. The Peacekeeper left the Kepler shipyards exactly 3 days after Captain Minho took command. The launch was silent and unremarkable. No crowds gathered to watch. No speeches were made. The ship simply disengaged from the construction framework and accelerated into the darkness, leaving the protection of the Kuiper Belt and heading toward the edge of human space. Minho stood on the bridge, watching the stars stream past as the ship reached cruising speed. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained together for only 3 days, but they moved like they had served together for years. Fear had a way of focusing the mind. Commander Bike Sora approached him, a datapad in her hands. She was his second in command, a tactical officer who had served with him during the border wars. She was one of the few people on this ship he trusted completely, which was why he had personally requested her for this mission. Captain, we have received word from Ambassador Han. The Council has responded to our ultimatum, and 7 species have agreed to cease hostilities immediately. They are calling for emergency peace talks. 2 species have not responded at all, and 3 species led by the Vrexian Empire have rejected our demands. Minho took the datapad and read the official response from Overlord Krathix. The message was short and predictable. Threats, insults, and a promise to crush any human military force that dared to interfere in Vrexian affairs. He is mobilizing a fleet, Sora said. Our intelligence estimates 300 ships. They are heading toward Earth. How long until they reach human space? 20 days if they maintain current speed. We will reach Threshold Station in 15 days. That gives us 5 days to prepare before they arrive. Minho handed back the datapad. Alert all stations. Combat readiness level 3. I want every system checked and rechecked. And get me Dr. Park. I need to know exactly what our options are if the Vrexians decide to test us. Sora nodded and walked away, already speaking into her communicator. Minho returned his attention to the view screen, watching the stars, thinking about what was coming. In her quarters, Ambassador Han Jiwoo prepared another message to the Galactic Council. She had not slept in 2 days. The diplomatic station was in chaos. The 7 species that had agreed to peace were frantically trying to organize negotiations. The 3 species that had rejected the ultimatum were making military preparations. And the 2 silent species were watching everything, waiting to see which side would win before committing themselves. This was the problem with the Council. It had no real authority. It could not enforce its decisions. For generations, it had been little more than a forum for species to argue while wars raged on unchecked. But that was about to change. Humanity had forced a choice, peace or the peacekeeper, and the galaxy was splitting along the lines of that choice. Jiwoo finished her message and sent it through encrypted channels. Then she allowed herself a moment of weakness. She pulled up a photograph on her personal terminal. Her family, her husband and her son both living safely on Earth. She had not told them exactly what she was doing here, only that it was important. She wondered if she would ever see them again. If humanity deployed the peacekeeper at full power, the political fallout would be catastrophic. She would probably spend the rest of her life answering for it in council chambers, defending the decision, explaining the necessity. But her family would be alive. Her son would grow up in a galaxy where total war was impossible. That was worth any personal cost. Aboard the Vrexian flagship, Overlord Krathix watched his fleet assemble. 300 warships, each bristling with weapons, each crewed by warriors who had never known anything but conquest. This was the 3rd Fleet, his personal armada, and it represented nearly a quarter of the Vrexian military power. Fleet Commander Crix stood beside him, reviewing tactical displays. My lord, the fleet will be ready to depart in 12 hours. But I must ask again, is this wise? We are violating the non-aggression treaty. If we attack Earth, the Council will have no choice but to respond. The Council will do nothing, Krathix replied. They never do. They will issue a statement of concern. They will call for peace talks. And by the time they finish talking, we will control human space and their precious peacekeeper will be destroyed. What if the peacekeeper is already operational? What if it is everything Ambassador Han claimed it was? Krathix turned to face his second-in-command. Then we will learn the truth through battle, and if it proves to be a real threat, we will adapt. But I do not believe the humans have anything that can stand against this fleet. They are young, Crix. They barely understand the galaxy they have entered. This talk of ending all wars is the fantasy of a naive species that has not yet learned how the universe truly works. Crix bowed his head in acknowledgement. But Krathix could see doubt in his officer's eyes. Good. Doubt kept warriors sharp. Arrogance made them careless. The Vrexian fleet departed 12 hours later, 300 vessels moving in perfect formation toward human space. The Peacekeeper reached Threshold Station exactly on schedule. The station was humanity's farthest outpost, a military base built to watch the border regions where human space met Vrexian territory. It was small compared to the fleets that passed through this region, but it was armed and ready. Station Commander Park Jian contacted the Peacekeeper as soon as it arrived in the system. Her face appeared on the main view screen and Minho could see the stress in her eyes. Captain Lee, welcome to Threshold. I wish you were arriving under better circumstances. Commander Park, status report. 5 of our border outposts have gone silent in the past week. We believe Vrexian advance scouts are probing our defenses. The main fleet is approximately 12 days out, but smaller forces are already harassing our positions. Casualties? None yet. They are not attacking. They are just watching, measuring our response times, testing to see if we will run. We will not run, Minho said. The Peacekeeper will take up position between Threshold Station and the projected arrival point of the Vrexian fleet. All station personnel should prepare for possible combat but follow my orders exactly. No one fires unless I give the command. Is that understood? Understood, Captain. But I have to ask, what is your plan? That fleet has 300 ships. You have one. Even if the Peacekeeper is everything they say it is, those are bad odds. Minho smiled grimly. Commander, the Peacekeeper was not built to fight wars. It was built to end them. You will see what I mean when the Vrexians arrive. The days passed slowly. The crew of the Peacekeeper ran constant drills, preparing themselves for what was coming. Dr. Park worked in engineering, calibrating the resonance core with engineer Kim Doyen. Commander Bayek Sora studied tactical data, trying to predict how the Vrexians would approach the battle. And Minho walked the corridors, speaking with his crew, learning their names, understanding who they were and why they had volunteered for this mission. One night, he found himself in the crew commons where off-duty personnel gathered to eat and relax. A young woman named Lieutenant Han Bora was playing guitar, singing a folk song in Korean that Minho remembered from his childhood. Other crew members sat around her, some singing along, others just listening. For a moment, Minho forgot about the Vrexian fleet, forgot about the impossible weapon he commanded, forgot about the weight of 400 lives resting on his decisions. For a moment, he just listened to the music and remembered why humanity was worth saving. Lieutenant Han finished her song and noticed Minho standing in the doorway. She stood up quickly, embarrassed. Captain, I apologize. I did not mean to be disrespectful. Sit, Lieutenant. That was beautiful. My mother used to sing that song. He entered the commons and sat down with his crew. They talked for an hour, about Earth, about families, about hopes for the future. No one mentioned the Vrexians. No one talked about the possibility that some of them might not survive what was coming. When Minho returned to his quarters later that night, he found Commander Sora waiting outside his door. You should not get too close to them, she said quietly. It will be harder if things go wrong. Things are already wrong, Minho replied. The fact that we had to build the Peacekeeper proves that. The fact that 400 people volunteered to crew it proves that. Getting to know them does not make it harder. It reminds me what we are fighting for. Sora looked at him for a long moment. Do you think we will have to activate the Omega configuration? Do you think we will have to deploy the field at full power? I do not know. I hope not. But if we do, I want to be able to remember every person who sacrifices themselves. I want to remember their names, their faces, their songs. Because if we force peace on the galaxy through their sacrifice, the least I can do is remember why it mattered. 10 days after the Peacekeeper arrived at Threshold Station, the first Vrexian ships appeared on long-range sensors. The countdown had reached its end. The battle that would determine the future of the galaxy was about to begin. Minho sat in the captain's chair on the bridge, surrounded by his crew, and broadcast a message on all channels, knowing that every species in the galaxy was listening. This is Captain Lee Minho of the UHNS Peacekeeper. Vrexian fleet, you have entered human space with hostile intent. You were given 30 days to choose peace. You have chosen war instead. The Galactic Council chamber had never been this full. Representatives from 23 different species crowded into the space, far more than the usual 12 permanent members. Everyone wanted to witness this moment. wanted to hear what the humans had to say about their weapon that could end all wars. Ambassador Han Ji-woo stood at the center of the chamber, just as she had 3 weeks ago when she delivered the ultimatum, but everything was different now. 3 weeks ago they had laughed at her. Today they watched her with fear, respect, and in some cases barely controlled anger. High Arbiter Velmoth raised one crystalline appendage, and the chamber fell silent. His ancient voice echoed through the space. Ambassador Han, humanity has demonstrated a weapon of unprecedented power. You have disarmed the Rexian Third Fleet without firing a shot, without destroying a single ship, without killing anyone. This should be celebrated as a miracle of restraint. Yet many species represented here today feel threatened by your actions. They fear that humanity now holds too much power, that you can dictate terms to the entire galaxy. Speak and help us understand your intentions. Ji-woo bowed slightly. She had not slept in days, and she felt the weight of every decision that had led to this moment. But her voice remained steady when she spoke. High Arbiter, honored members of the Council, I understand your fears. In 3 weeks, humanity has gone from being one voice among many to being the species that controls the most powerful weapon in the known galaxy. That change is frightening, but I need you to understand something fundamental. We did not build the Peacekeeper because we wanted power. We built it because we were tired of watching species destroy each other for no good reason. Counselor Vexer, the avian representative who had questioned humanity's capabilities weeks ago, spoke up. But Ambassador, you have proven that you can disarm any military force in the galaxy. What is to stop you from using that power to create a human empire? What is to stop you from becoming the very thing you claim to oppose? Nothing, Ji-woo replied simply, and the chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. She waited for quiet, then continued. Nothing stops us except our own choice. And that is the point. Every species in this galaxy has the ability to choose violence or choose peace. We have simply changed the cost of choosing violence. If you attack your neighbors, if you wage wars of conquest, humanity will respond. But if you choose peace, if you resolve your conflicts through discussion and compromise, you will never see the Peacekeeper again. A new voice spoke up, harsh and broken. It was Overlord Krathix. The Vrexian leader had traveled here personally, something he had never done before. He stood in the gallery reserved for non-council species, surrounded by guards who were now armed only with ceremonial weapons that could not function as actual weapons. Ambassador Han speaks of choice, but she has taken all meaningful choices away from us. My fleet is defenseless, my empire is vulnerable, and I am forced to stand here and beg for mercy from a species that I considered beneath notice just months ago. Tell me, where is the choice in that? Ji-woo turned to face the Vrexian overlord directly. Overlord Krathix, you still have every meaningful choice. You can choose to rebuild your society around something other than conquest. You can choose to contribute to the galaxy in ways that do not involve violence. You can choose to be remembered as the Vrexian who led his people into a new age instead of the last of the old conquerors. Those are all real choices. What you cannot choose anymore is to take those choices away from others by force. Krathix stared at her, and for a moment, the entire chamber held its breath. Then slowly, the massive Vrexian bowed his head in acknowledgement. It was not agreement. It was not forgiveness, but it was recognition of reality. High Arbiter Velmoth spoke again. Ambassador, the Council has reviewed all available data on your vessel. We understand that the resonance field you demonstrated was at minimal power. We need to know, what is the full capability of the Peacekeeper? Can you truly disable every weapon in the galaxy as you claim? Before Ji-woo could answer, the chamber doors opened and Captain Lee Min-ho entered. He wore his uniform and walked with the bearing of a man who commanded the most powerful ship in existence. But his eyes showed the exhaustion of someone who had not stopped working since the confrontation with the Vrexian fleet. High Arbiter, Min-ho said, bowing to the Council. I am Captain Lee Min-ho, Commander of the Peacekeeper. I have come to answer your questions personally. Velmoth gestured for him to approach. Captain Lee, the Council is grateful for your presence. Please explain to us the full capabilities of your vessel. Min-ho stood next to Ambassador Han and looked around the chamber at all the representatives watching him. He thought about his crew, about the 32 people who had fallen unconscious during the demonstration, about Dr. Park Hyun, who was still recovering in the medical bay. The Peacekeeper has 3 operational levels. The tactical deployment you witnessed against the Vrexian fleet was the first level. It affects a specific area and can disable all weapons within range. The cost to my crew was significant but temporary. 32 people lost consciousness but are recovering. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The second level is regional deployment. The resonance field expands across multiple star systems, affecting entire sectors of space. This level would require greater sacrifice from my crew. Our estimates suggest that approximately 50 crew members would fall into a deep coma. They would not die, but they would not wake up either. Their consciousness would be permanently bound to the field, maintaining it. The chamber filled with shocked whispers. Minho continued speaking. The third level is what we call Omega configuration, a galactic-scale deployment. The resonance field would expand across the entire known galaxy, disabling every weapon on every world, every ship, every military installation. Wars would become impossible, but activating the Omega configuration would require every member of my crew to sacrifice themselves. 400 people would fall into a permanent coma, and the resonance core would burn out, making the technology irreplaceable for decades or perhaps centuries. Counselor Vexir asked quietly, "And you have crew members who volunteered for this? People who are willing to sacrifice their consciousness to maintain permanent peace?" "Every person on my ship volunteered, knowing the full cost," Minho replied. "They are not soldiers being ordered to fight. They are people who believe that ending galactic war is worth any personal sacrifice." High Arbiter Velmuth spoke softly, and for the first time in 800 years, his voice carried genuine emotion. "Captain, I must tell you something. The weapon you described, the silencer from the ancient texts, it was real. 10,000 years ago, a coalition of species built something similar. They activated it at full power, achieved galactic peace, but the cost was terrible. The entire crew died, not fell into comas, but died, and the civilizations that benefited from that peace stagnated for thousands of years. Without conflict, without challenge, they lost the drive to improve, to explore, to grow. They became dependent on enforced peace instead of learning to choose peace for themselves." The chamber fell completely silent. Jiwoo felt her stomach twist. This was information they had not known, information that changed everything. "Are you saying," Minho asked slowly, "that forcing peace on the galaxy is wrong?" "I am saying," Velmuth replied, "that it is complicated. Yes, that ancient weapon ended a terrible war. Yes, it saved countless lives. But it also robbed those civilizations of something important: the right to struggle, to fail, to learn from their mistakes, and to eventually choose peace because they understood its value, not because it was imposed upon them." Overlord Krathik spoke from the gallery. "So the ancient texts were correct. The silencer did exist, and it destroyed more than just weapons. It destroyed the spirit of those it claimed to save." "Not destroyed," Velmuth said, "but certainly diminished. The question we must ask ourselves today is whether we want to repeat that history." "Captain Lee, Ambassador Han, humanity has created something miraculous and terrible. What do you intend to do with it?" Minho and Jiwoo looked at each other. They had discussed this privately, had argued about it late into the night during the weeks of preparation. Now they had to make their answer public. Jiwoo spoke first. "The Council has seen what the Peacekeeper can do. 7 species have already agreed to peace terms. The Vrexian Empire has withdrawn from human space. Change is happening. But perhaps the Omega configuration is not the answer. Perhaps the threat of it is enough." "You would keep it as a deterrent?" Vexir asked. "But deterrents only work if people believe you will use them." "Then we will use it selectively," Minho said. "Not the full galactic deployment, but regional interventions when necessary. If a species decides to wage war of conquest, we will disable their ability to do so. But we will not remove the possibility of all conflict everywhere. We will not make the galaxy dependent on human enforcement of peace. That is still tyranny," someone called from the gallery. "You set yourselves up as judges of who may fight and who may not." "Yes," Jiwoo agreed, and her honesty shocked many in the chamber. "It is a form of tyranny, but it is a limited one. We are not trying to control your governments or your cultures or your ways of life." The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a dying star that cast red light through the massive windows. 12 different alien species sat around the circular table, their translators humming softly as they argued. They had been arguing for 3 hours now, and Ambassador Han Jiwoo stood quietly at the center, waiting for them to finish. She was a small woman by human standards, wearing the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. Her dark hair was pulled back tightly and her hands were clasped behind her back. She had been standing there without moving for the entire 3 hours, and some of the aliens had started to notice. Humans were known for their patience, but this was something different. This was the stillness of someone who held all the cards and knew it. High Arbiter Velmoth finally raised one of his crystalline appendages, and the chamber fell silent. The ancient being had lived for 800 years and had seen empires rise and fall. His voice came through the translators like wind chimes in a storm. Ambassador Han, you have made a claim that many here find difficult to believe. You say that humanity will force peace upon the galaxy. You, whose species has barely been traveling among the stars for 2 centuries. Please explain how you intend to accomplish this. Jiwoo bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that meant nothing to most of the species present, but everything to those who understood human customs. When she spoke, her voice was clear and calm. High Arbiter, honored council members, I am not here to explain how. I am here to deliver a message. You have 30 solar cycles to cease all military hostilities. All of them. Every species represented here and every species under your protection must stand down. If you do not, humanity will deploy the UHNS Peacekeeper, and wars will end. Not just your current wars, all wars forever, the chamber erupted. The Vrexian representative, a massive reptilian creature named Overlord Krathix, slammed his clawed fist on the table hard enough to crack the stone. His voice boomed through the translators. This is an insult. Humanity threatens us? You control 14 systems. My empire alone spans 40 conquered worlds. We have been making war among the stars since before your ancestors discovered fire. Other voices joined in, some outraged, others mocking. The avian representative from the Skren species, Counselor Vexer, spoke more quietly but with clear disdain. Ambassador, surely you understand how this sounds. The Galactic Council has been trying to mediate peace for 3 generations. What makes you think humanity of all species can succeed where we have failed? Jiwoo waited for the noise to die down. She did not look angry or defensive. She simply stood there, and somehow that made her more intimidating than any show of force could have been. I understand your skepticism, she said. I would feel the same way in your position. But I need you to understand something fundamental about humanity. We do not make empty threats. When we say we will do something, we do it. Not because we are arrogant. Not because we believe we are better than you. But because when we see something that needs to be done, we find a way to do it no matter the cost. Pretty words. Krathix growled. But words are not weapons. No, Jiwoo agreed. They are not. But the Peacekeeper is. And in 30 days you will see what it can do. I hope for all our sakes that you choose peace before then. She bowed once more and walked out of the chamber. The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss, and the council chamber exploded into argument once again. High Arbiter Velmoth did not join the arguing. He was old enough to remember the ancient texts, the ones that spoke of a weapon from the last great galactic war, 10,000 years ago. A weapon called the Silencer. A weapon that had ended that war not by destroying armies but by making war itself impossible. The texts had been found only recently in a derelict archive ship drifting in deep space, and they mentioned humanity. Or rather, they mentioned a species that would come from a small blue world, a species that arrived late to the galactic stage but carried with them the key to ending all conflict. Velmoth looked at the Vrexian overlord and wondered if the aggressive reptilian understood what was coming. Probably not. Krathix had built his entire empire on strength and violence. To admit that a younger species might have power beyond his own would destroy everything he believed about the natural order of the universe, but Velmoth had not lived 800 years by ignoring warning signs. Far across the galaxy, in the dark reaches beyond the human colonies, Overlord Krathix sat in his war room aboard his flagship. He was not laughing anymore. His intelligence officers had spread dozens of holographic displays around him, each showing fragments of intercepted human communications. What have you found? He demanded. The lead intelligence officer, a smaller Vrexian named Crix, gestured to one of the displays. My lord, we have been monitoring human space for the past year. 6 months ago, all communications from the Kuiper Belt region of their home system went silent. Complete blackout. No commercial traffic, no civilian signals, nothing. A construction project, Krathix said. A massive one. Our sensors detected energy readings that make no sense. Power generation on a scale that should require a small star to sustain. We thought it was a sensor error, but multiple readings confirmed it. Whatever they are building out there, it is drawing more power than their entire civilization uses. Krathik stared at the data. He had conquered 40 worlds by understanding his enemies, by knowing when they were bluffing and when they were serious. Everything about Ambassador Han's demeanor told him she was serious. And if the humans were drawing that much power for a single project, assemble the third fleet, he ordered. 300 ships. We will strike at Earth before this peacekeeper of theirs can be deployed. If we destroy it in its construction yard, their threat is meaningless. My lord, Crick said carefully, Earth is protected by the non-aggression treaty. If we attack their homeworld, the entire council will turn against us. The council is weak, Krathik snarled. They will protest and do nothing as they always do. By the time they gather the will to act, we will control human space and whatever weapon they have built will be ours. Prepare the fleet. We leave in 3 days. As his officers scrambled to obey, Krathik looked at the holographic display showing Earth, that small blue marble hanging in the darkness. He had fought hundreds of battles, conquered dozens of species, and built an empire on the bones of those who opposed him. But for the first time in his long life, he felt something he had not felt since he was young and untested. He felt uncertain. And underneath that uncertainty, so faint he barely recognized it, he felt the first cold touch of fear. Ambassador Han Jiwoo sat in her quarters on the diplomatic station, looking out at the stars. She had delivered the message as instructed. Now the clock was counting down. 30 days until the peacekeeper was ready. 30 days for the galaxy to choose peace. She thought about Captain Lee Min-ho, who was even now preparing to take command of humanity's greatest achievement and possibly its greatest sin. She thought about Dr. Park Hyun, who had built something that could change the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. And she thought about the cost. Because nothing this important ever came without a cost. Her communicator chimed. She activated it and a short text message appeared. It was from Earth's High Command, sent through encrypted channels. The Vrexians are mobilizing. Fleet estimated at 300 vessels. They are coming. May God forgive us for what we are about to do. Jiwoo closed her eyes and whispered a prayer in Korean, the language of her childhood, the language she used when she needed to speak to something larger than herself. Then she opened her eyes and began preparing her next message to the council. The war that would end all wars was about to begin. The Vrexian fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Antares Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that marked the boundary between human and neutral space. 300 warships spread out in perfect formation, a display of military power that had crushed dozens of species over the centuries. And facing them, alone in the void, was a single human vessel. Aboard the flagship, Overlord Krathik stared at the peacekeeper on his tactical display. The human ship was large, certainly, but size meant nothing in space combat. He had destroyed larger vessels with focused fire. What bothered him was not the ship itself, but the way it just sat there, waiting like a predator confident in its strength. Fleet Commander Crick's analysis. Crick studied the sensor readouts, his scaled brow furrowed in confusion. My lord, the human vessel is not maneuvering. It is not charging weapons. It is not even raising shields. It is just sitting there, scanning for other human ships. Nothing. The station is 3 light hours behind us, too far to provide support. There are no reinforcements. It is just the one ship. Krathik leaned back in his command throne. This made no sense. Either the humans were bluffing, which seemed impossible given Ambassador Han's confidence, or they truly believed one ship could stand against his entire fleet. Neither option pleased him. Open a channel, he ordered. On the Peacekeeper's bridge, Captain Minho watched the Vrexian fleet spread out on his view screen. Commander Bexora stood at the tactical station, her hands moving across the controls as she analyzed the enemy formation. Captain, we are being hailed. Put it through. Overlord Krathik appeared on the screen, massive and intimidating in his ceremonial armor. His voice came through the translator with barely contained fury. Human Captain, this is your final warning. Move your vessel aside or we will destroy it. We are proceeding to Earth to eliminate your government's ability to threaten the Vrexian Empire. You cannot stop us. Minho stood up from his chair and walked closer to the screen. He appeared small compared to the Vrexian overlord, just a human in a simple uniform. But when he spoke, his voice was steady and calm. Overlord Krathik, I know you believe that 300 ships can defeat one. In most cases, you would be right. But the Peacekeeper is not like other ships. It was not built to fight wars. It was built to end them. I am asking you one more time. Turn your fleet around and return to your territory. Choose peace. Krathix laughed, a harsh sound that made the translator crackle. Peace is for the weak. Power is the only truth in this universe, and my fleet represents more power than your entire species can muster. You have courage, human, but courage without strength is just foolishness. Stand aside or die. The channel closed. Minho turned to his crew. Every face on the bridge was tense but determined. These people had volunteered knowing this moment might come. They trusted him to make the right decision. Dr. Park, are we ready? In engineering, Dr. Park Hyun stood before the resonance core. The massive sphere of exotic matter hummed with barely contained energy, equations scrolling across its surface in patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Engineer Kim Doyen worked at a nearby console monitoring power levels. The core is ready, Captain, Hyun said through the comm. Resonance field configured for tactical deployment. Range set for 500,000 kilometers. That should encompass their entire fleet. Projected crew impact? Doyen checked his readouts. At this power level, approximately 30 crew members will experience severe fatigue and possible unconsciousness. They will recover within a few hours. No permanent damage. Minho closed his eyes briefly. 30 people, 30 members of his crew would pay the price for this demonstration. But if it worked, if it made the Vrexians understand what they were facing, maybe it would prevent a larger conflict. Maybe it would save lives in the long run. All crew, this is the captain. Brace for resonance field activation. Medical teams, stand by in all sections. This is not a drill. He sat back in his chair and looked at the Vrexian fleet on the view screen. 300 ships, thousands of warriors, all about to learn that humanity played by different rules. Commander Sora, target solution, multiple targets acquired. But Captain, they are not locking weapons on us yet. They think we are going to run. Then let us educate them. Dr. Park, activate the resonance field. In engineering, Hyun placed his hand on the control panel. He thought of his daughters, of the colony that had died, of all the people across the galaxy who had suffered because stronger species had decided their lives did not matter. For them, he whispered. Then he initiated the sequence. The resonance core flared to life. Fleet Commander Crix was giving firing orders when reality changed. That was the only way he could describe it later. Reality simply changed around them. Every sensor on every ship went haywire for 3 seconds. Space itself seemed to ripple, like the surface of water disturbed by a stone. Then everything went quiet. Status report. Krathix roared. My lord, I do not understand. All weapon systems are offline. Main batteries, point defense, missile tubes, everything. Life support is functioning. Engines are operational. But every weapon on every ship is completely dead. Then restart them. We are trying. The systems are not damaged. They just will not fire. It is like the weapons have forgotten how to be weapons. On the Peacekeeper, Minho watched his sensors as the Vrexian fleet drifted in confusion. Not a single ship returned fire because not a single ship could. The resonance field had spread out from the Peacekeeper in an invisible wave, touching every vessel in the enemy fleet, and in that instant of contact, it had rewritten the fundamental nature of their weapons. Status of our crew? Minho asked. Medical reports coming in from all sections, Commander Sora replied. 32 crew members unconscious as predicted. No life-threatening conditions. Dr. Park is among them. Minho felt a weight settle on his chest. 32 people had just paid the price for this demonstration, and Park Hyun had deliberately placed himself among them. The scientist had wanted to feel what his creation did to people. He had wanted to pay the cost personally, get them to medical, and open a channel to the Vrexian flagship. Overlord Krathix was still trying to comprehend what had happened when the human captain appeared on his screen again. Overlord, what you have just experienced was the resonance field at minimal power, affecting only your fleet. The Peacekeeper can extend this effect across light years, across entire star systems, across the galaxy if necessary. Every weapon you possess is now permanently disabled. Your ships can fly and your crews can live, but you cannot make war anymore. Krathix stared at the human, and for the first time in his long life, he understood what it meant to be helpless. His entire fleet, 300 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy, had been reduced to harmless transport vessels in an instant. This is not possible, he whispered. It is not only possible, it is done, and this was just a demonstration. We affected 300 ships, Imagine if we had extended the field across your entire empire. Every weapon on every world permanently disabled. Your warrior culture would end in a single moment. You would destroy everything we are. No, Minho said, and his voice was sad rather than triumphant. We would free you from the need to be what you are. You have built your entire civilization on strength and conquest. But what happens when conquest becomes impossible? What do you become then? Perhaps something better. Krathix wanted to rage, to threaten, to promise revenge. But what could he do? His weapons were gone. His power was gone. All that remained was the truth that he had been trying to avoid since Ambassador Han first delivered her ultimatum. Humanity had changed the rules of the game, and there was nothing he could do about it. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now you have a choice. You can return to your empire and tell your people what happened here. You can explain that the age of conquest is over, or you can continue toward Earth, and we will expand the resonance field to encompass your entire territory. Every weapon, every warrior, every tool of violence permanently silenced. The choice is yours, but I strongly suggest you choose wisely. The channel closed. Aboard the Peacekeeper, Minho stood and walked to the view screen, watching the Vrexian fleet hang motionless in space. Around him, his crew worked quietly, monitoring systems, checking on their unconscious colleagues, processing what they had just done. Commander Sora approached him. Captain, we are receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council. The entire confrontation was broadcast across all channels. Every species in the galaxy just watched us disarm the Vrexian Third Fleet. And the reactions are mixed. Some species are celebrating. Others are terrified. The Council is calling for an emergency session. They want answers. They will get answers. But first let us see what Overlord Krathix decides to do. They watched the sensors for 2 hours. The Vrexian fleet remained in position, internal communications lighting up as officers and warriors tried to understand what had happened and what it meant. Then, slowly the fleet began to turn around. One by one, the ships changed course, moving away from Earth. Heading back toward Vrexian space, Overlord Krathix had made his choice. In the medical bay, Dr. Park Hyun woke up slowly, his head pounding and his body feeling like it weighed twice as much as normal. A nurse was checking his vital signs.